793 AD. Dragon ships appear on the horizon. Within hours, monasteries are burning. Europe will never be the same. For 300 years, these warriors terrorized continents. But who were they really? They discovered America 500 years before Columbus. They founded Russia. They practiced democracy while Europe had kings. They sailed from Baghdad to Newfoundland. They built empires. They changed world history. But why did they raid? How did they conquer? And what made them unstoppable? The complete Viking story, from origins to empire to legacy. This is the brutal truth they don't teach. Watch now. Let's start at the beginning. Where did Vikings come from? The Viking homeland was Scandinavia, modern-day Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. But these weren't unified countries yet. They were collections of small kingdoms, chiefdoms, and independent settlements. The landscape shaped everything. Norway had mountains and fjords, making farming difficult. Sweden had forests and lakes. Denmark had flat agricultural land. This geography created different Viking cultures with one thing in common: the sea. The sea was their highway, their lifeline, their escape route, and Scandinavians became the best sailors on Earth. But why did they suddenly start raiding in the late 700s? Several theories exist. 1. Population pressure. Scandinavia was getting crowded. Younger sons couldn't inherit land, so they sought fortune elsewhere. 2. Climate change. The medieval warm period made sailing easier and opened new routes. 3. Frankish weakness. Charlemagne's empire was fracturing. Wealthy but poorly defended coastal targets appeared. 4. Trade knowledge. Scandinavian traders learned about wealthy monasteries and towns. Why trade when you can take? Probably all these factors combined. And on June 8, 793 AD, Vikings struck Lindisfarne Monastery. It was the first recorded Viking raid, but it wouldn't be the last. The Viking Age had begun. Once Vikings started raiding, they exploded across the known world. Let's track their expansion because it's absolutely insane. To the west, Norwegian Vikings discovered and settled Iceland around 874 AD. Iceland became a major Viking colony. By 930 AD, it had 60,000 people. From Iceland, they pushed further. Erik the Red was exiled from Iceland for murder. So in 982 AD, he sailed west and discovered Greenland. He called it Greenland as marketing to attract settlers to this ice-covered island. It worked. Vikings established settlements in Greenland that lasted 450 years. Then, around 1000 AD, Leif Erikson sailed from Greenland and reached North America. He landed in what's now Newfoundland, Canada. He called it Vinland because of the wild grapes growing there. Vikings built settlements. Archaeological evidence at L'Anse aux Meadows proves this. They encountered indigenous peoples. They called them Skrælings. Trading happened, then fighting. Vikings were outnumbered and eventually abandoned Vinland. But they'd discovered America 500 years before Columbus. Meanwhile, to the east, Swedish Vikings were moving into Russia. They traveled down rivers, the Volga, the Dnieper, reaching the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. They founded cities, Novgorod, Kiev, eventually creating the Kievan Rus, the foundation of Russia. The word Russia comes from Rus, the Slavic name for these Swedish Vikings. They traded with the Byzantine Empire, bringing back silk, silver, and spices. Some Vikings joined the Byzantine Emperor's elite Varangian Guard. These were Viking bodyguards protecting the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople. The most famous was Harald Hardrada, who later became King of Norway. To the south, Danish and Norwegian Vikings raided and settled across Britain and Ireland. They conquered huge portions of England, the Danelaw, an area under Viking law. Cities like York, called Jorvik by Vikings, became major Viking centers. In 865 AD, the Great Heathen Army, a massive Viking coalition, invaded England. They conquered kingdoms one by one. Only Wessex under King Alfred held out. The struggle between Vikings and Anglo-Saxons shaped English history for centuries. In Ireland, Vikings founded Dublin, Cork, Limerick, and Waterford, Ireland's first true cities. Vikings moved to Scotland, taking the Orkney and Shetland Islands. They raided deep into France, sailing up the Seine River to attack Paris multiple times. In 911 AD, French King Charles the Simple made a deal with Viking leader Rollo. Rollo would stop raiding if he got land. Charles agreed. This land became Normandy, land of the Northmen. Rollo's descendant, William the Conqueror, would later invade England in 1066. Vikings even reached the Mediterranean, raiding Spain, Morocco, Italy. They attacked Seville, Luna in Italy, even sailed into the Mediterranean repeatedly. No coast was safe. Viking range was global. The secret to Viking success was the Longship. Let me explain why this ship was revolutionary. Viking longships were clinker-built, overlapping planks riveted together. This made them flexible. They could twist with waves without breaking. They were shallow draft, drawing only about 3 feet of water. This meant they could navigate rivers and land on any beach. They were symmetrical, bow and stern identical. This meant they could reverse direction instantly without turning around. They could be rowed or sailed. Vikings used large square sails when wind was favorable. When not, 30 to 60 oarsmen powered the ship. Speed? Viking ships could reach 15 to 17 knots under sail. That's faster than most medieval ships. Range? Vikings crossed the Atlantic Ocean in open boats. Iceland is 600 miles from Norway. Greenland is 900 miles from Iceland. North America is another 1,500 miles. These ships made it all. But here's what made them weapons. They could strike anywhere. Rivers, coastlines, even inland via river travel. Defenders never knew where Vikings would hit next. And after raiding, Vikings could be gone in hours. By the time armies assembled to fight, Vikings were back at sea. This created terror across Europe. Chronicles from the time record a prayer, "From the fury of the Northmen, O Lord, deliver us." The Longship wasn't just a boat, it was a strategic weapon that changed medieval warfare. Let's talk about Viking warriors themselves. First, equipment. The average Viking warrior wore a padded leather or cloth tunic. Wealthier warriors had mail shirts, chainmail made of interlocking iron rings. A full mail shirt had 20,000 to 30,000 rings. Handmade. Expensive. Helmets were simple iron caps, sometimes with nose guards. No horns. That's Hollywood nonsense. Shields were round, made of wood covered in leather with iron boss in center, about 3 feet in diameter, painted in bright colors, red, yellow, blue. Weapons, most Vikings carried spears, cheaper, longer reach, effective. Axes were common, both one-handed and two-handed Dane axes. Swords were prestige weapons, expensive, pattern-welded with beautiful designs. Vikings named their swords Legbiter, Skull Splitter, Life Taker. A good sword was an heirloom, passed through generations. Bows were crucial. Vikings were skilled archers. In battle, Vikings used shield wall tactics, overlapping shields creating a wall. They'd advance slowly, shields locked, stabbing with spears over and under the wall. Breaking the shield wall meant death. Now, Berserkers. Berserkers were elite warriors who fought in trance-like fury. The word comes from bear shirt. They supposedly wore bear or wolf skins. Berserkers would work themselves into a rage before battle. They'd bite their shields, howl, foam at the mouth. Then they'd charge, seemingly immune to pain, unstoppable. Were they using drugs? Maybe. Henbane or mushrooms could induce altered states. Were they suffering from psychological conditions? Possibly. Or was it trained battle frenzy, self-hypnosis through ritual? We don't know for sure. but accounts of berserkers appear in multiple sources. They were feared and respected. Kings kept them as bodyguards and shock troops. Let's talk about how Vikings actually lived. Viking society had three classes: jarls, nobles, wealthy landowners, chieftains; carls, free farmers, craftsmen, traders. Most Vikings were carls; thralls, slaves, captured in raids or born into slavery. But here's what's interesting. Social mobility existed. A successful raid could make a carl wealthy enough to become a jarl. A freed thrall could become a carl. Status wasn't completely fixed. Vikings practiced democracy through the Thing, a public assembly. Free men gathered to vote on laws, settle disputes, and make community decisions. Iceland's Althing, established in 930 AD, is the world's oldest existing parliament. Every summer, Vikings from across Iceland traveled to Thingvellir. They'd debate laws, settle feuds, hold trials. Speakers would present cases, the assembly would vote. This was direct democracy in action. Legal codes were sophisticated. Laws covered property rights, inheritance, compensation for injuries. If you killed someone, you owed wergild, blood money, to the victim's family. Amount depended on the victim's social status. This prevented endless blood feuds. Justice was economic, not just violent. Daily Viking life was agricultural. Most Vikings farmed, growing barley, rye, oats, raising cattle, sheep, pigs. Women ran households while men farmed, fished, or raided. Homes were long houses, rectangular buildings housing extended families and animals. Inside, fires burned in central hearths. Smoke escaped through roof holes. Benches lined walls for sitting and sleeping. Vikings ate porridge, bread, fish, meat, cheese. They drank ale and mead. Entertainment included storytelling, music, board games like Hnefatafl. They valued poetry highly. Skalds, poets, held honored positions. Craftsmanship was advanced. Vikings worked iron, silver, gold. They created intricate jewelry, weapons, tools. Blacksmiths were respected. A good blacksmith was invaluable. Viking women had remarkable freedom compared to medieval European women. They could own property independently. They could inherit equally with brothers. They could divorce husbands. If a woman wanted a divorce, she announced it before witnesses. Done. Divorced. She took her dowry and property with her. Women ran households and farms when men traveled. This meant managing workers, making trade deals, settling disputes. Viking wives wielded real economic and social power. Some women became traders themselves, traveling to markets. Now, Shieldmaidens, female warriors. For centuries, historians dismissed these as myths. Then, in 2017, DNA analysis changed everything. A high-status Viking warrior burial at Birka, Sweden, was tested. The grave contained swords, axes, arrows, a spear, 2 horses, and tactical gaming pieces. Everyone assumed it was a male warrior's grave. DNA revealed female. This wasn't a woman buried with warrior symbols. This was a warrior. More research found other potential female warrior burials across Scandinavia. Were Shieldmaidens common? No, but they existed. Women could choose warrior paths if they wanted. Norse sagas mention famous Shieldmaidens: Lagertha, Freydis Eriksdottir. Freydis was Leif Erikson's sister. She traveled to Vinland. According to sagas, when Vikings were attacked by Skrælings, Freydis grabbed a sword. She was pregnant at the time. She slapped the sword against her chest and charged the attackers alone. They fled in terror. True or legend? We don't know, but it shows Norse women could be warriors in their culture. Viking religion shaped everything about their culture. They worshipped the Aesir, gods living in Asgard. Odin, the All-Father, god of wisdom, war, death, and poetry. Odin sacrificed his eye for wisdom. He hung himself on Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days to gain knowledge of runes. Odin rode an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir. He kept 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, Thought and Memory, who flew across the world bringing him news. Odin welcomed slain warriors to Valhalla, his great hall. There, warriors feasted and fought, preparing for Ragnarok, the final battle. Thor, god of thunder, protector of mankind. Thor wielded Mjolnir, his hammer, which always returned to his hand. He rode a chariot pulled by goats and battled giants. Vikings wore Thor's hammer amulets for protection. Freya, goddess of love, beauty, fertility, war, and death. Freya claimed half the slain warriors, taking them to her hall, Folkvanger. She wore a cloak of falcon feathers and rode a chariot pulled by cats. Loki, the trickster god, neither good nor evil, but chaos. Loki was cunning, shape-shifting, causing trouble, but sometimes helping gods. His children included Fenrir the wolf, Jormungandr the world serpent, and Hel, ruler of the underworld. Vikings believed in 9 realms connected by Yggdrasil, the world tree, Midgard, the human world, Asgard, realm of the gods, Jotunheim, realm of giants, and 6 others, each housing different beings. Vikings practiced rituals and sacrifices. Blot, sacrificial festivals, where animals, sometimes humans, were offered to gods. Human sacrifice was rare but documented, especially for major occasions. When a chieftain died, elaborate funerals occurred. Ship burials, the dead placed in ships with weapons, treasure, sometimes sacrificed slaves. The ship was burned or buried. This ensured the dead traveled well-equipped to the afterlife. Vikings believed in fate, weird. Destiny was woven by the Norns, 3 beings who controlled fate. Even gods couldn't escape fate. Ragnarok, the prophesied end of the world, would come inevitably. Gods would battle giants and monsters. Odin would die, Thor would die, the world would burn. But then the world would be reborn, life would continue. This cyclical view of existence shaped Viking fearlessness. Death was inevitable, destiny was fixed, so fight bravely, die honorably, and feast in Valhalla. The Viking Age traditionally ends in 1066 AD. Why that date? The Battle of Stamford Bridge. King Harald Hardrada of Norway invaded England with a massive army. He'd been a Viking adventurer, a Varangian guard, and now a king seeking glory. He landed in England with 300 ships and 10,000 to 15,000 warriors. King Harold Godwinson of England marched north to meet him. At Stamford Bridge on September 25, 1066, they fought. Harald Hardrada was killed. The Viking army was crushed. This was the last great Viking invasion of England. Ironically, 3 weeks later, William the Conqueror, a descendant of Vikings, invaded from Normandy. William won at Hastings. Vikings had conquered England, but as Frenchified Normans, not Norse pagans. The Viking Age was over. Why did it end? Christianity reduced raiding. Christian Vikings couldn't raid Christian lands as freely. European defenses improved. Castles, standing armies, fortified cities made raiding harder. Scandinavian kingdoms centralized. Kings established control, reducing independent raiding. Vikings assimilated. They became Normans in France, English in England, Russians in the East. The wild raiders became settled kingdoms. But Viking legacy didn't end. Viking influence shaped world history permanently. Language, English contains hundreds of Norse words: knife, sky, egg, cake, skull, take, they, them, their, all from Old Norse. Place names across Britain reflect Viking settlement. Anywhere ending in by, thorpe, or thwaite is Viking. Whitby, Grimsby, Scunthorpe, all Viking names. Genetically, Vikings left their mark. DNA studies show Scandinavian ancestry across Britain, Ireland, Iceland, Russia. Politically, Vikings founded nations. Russia traces roots to Viking Rus. Normandy became a major European power. Iceland and the Faroe Islands maintain Viking heritage. Legally, Viking law codes influence later European law. Trial by jury has roots in Viking assemblies. Culturally, Vikings influenced medieval Europe. Their ships inspired shipbuilding across Europe. Their trade networks connected continents. Their art, interlaced patterns, animal motifs, influenced medieval art. Literature, Norse sagas became foundations of storytelling. Tolkien based Middle-earth heavily on Norse mythology. Wagner's Ring of Cycle retells Norse myths. Modern fantasy owes massive debt to Viking stories. The idea of the hero's journey, of tragic fate, of honor and glory, Viking concepts all. Vikings shaped how we think about courage, adventure, and destiny. So what's the brutal truth about Vikings? They were complex, contradictory, human. They were brilliant sailors who discovered continents. They were democratic, holding assemblies while Europe had absolute kings. They were hygienic, bathing weekly when Europeans rarely bathed. They were traders, connecting 3 continents economically. They were poets and storytellers creating literary masterpieces. They respected women's rights more than most medieval societies. But they were also brutal raiders who terrorized Europe for 300 years. They enslaved thousands. They burned monasteries. They killed without mercy. They practiced human sacrifice. They glorified violence. Both sides are true. History isn't simple. Vikings were neither heroes nor villains. They were people from their time, shaped by their culture, making choices. What makes Vikings fascinating isn't the Hollywood image, it's the reality. Complex, contradictory, brutally honest. They weren't perfect, but they were real, and their impact on world history is undeniable. From discovering America to founding Russia, from influencing English language to inspiring modern fantasy, the Viking Age changed everything. And that's the truth they don't teach. Drop a comment. What surprised you most? Should we do deep dives into specific Vikings, Ragnar Lothbrok, Harald Hardrada, or Leif Erikson? Or should we explore Viking shipbuilding in detail? Let me know. And if you want more complete historical deep dives exposing the truth behind the legends, hit that subscribe button, because we're uncovering history's greatest stories one truth at a time. Peace out.